Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide.
Welcome aboard, preschool peeps. I don't know why I did that. Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
I love it though.
I have no idea why I did that. But welcome. Welcome. Today we have a sort of, I think we usually call these like nuts and bolts episodes, sort of nuts and bolts, having to do with helping children with pronunciation of words.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I came across a resource and was learning about this. And I thought it was super interesting. Some of the things that I kind of knew, but other things, absolutely not. So we wanted to share it with all of our preschool peeps. Sometimes children come to us having trouble pronouncing certain letters, the sounds of certain letters. And there are times in which children absolutely need speech therapy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It should be recommended. Often it can be very, very helpful, especially for under the age of 3, early intervention, over the age of 3, other services, other speech therapy services. And over the age of 3, special education needs are handled through the child study team in the United States anyway, handled through the child study team in your school district usually. But under the age of 3 in the United States, early intervention. Sometimes children absolutely need those services. And sometimes children are a little borderline or don't qualify for those services. I've had children where we thought, oh, for sure, this child would benefit, but they didn't qualify.
Because it has to be quite a significant delay.
They have to miss a certain number of sounds.
In the 3 to 5-year-old range.
Yeah.
It has to be quite a significant, it's a certain percentage. I forget what that is, but yeah.
They have to miscue a certain number of times. And sometimes they don't. And I'll just give you one example. My older son, when he was young, he had one miscue. So he wouldn't have qualified for these services necessarily. He had trouble pronouncing the letter L, which is not so unusual.
Yeah.
He used to pronounce it like a W. And we decided we're going to work with him on this using some of the strategies that I've learned about, but others I didn't even think about back then. So one of those strategies is exaggerating your mouth and tongue position so that the children can see it.
Yeah.
And that's something we used to do with Michael. So we would sit Michael down with words that had L's in them and say things to him like, L, and so that he could see the tongue touching the back of my teeth and so that he could see my mouth position. And we would have him imitate that. Children are great imitators. So we would be like, Michael, look, la, la. And he would look at us and he would say, la, la. And then we would say, lollipop. And he would say, la, la, lollipop. And we would be like, oh, we're not there. But when we practiced it enough, he did eventually get it. So this wasn't the sort of speech difficulty that.
Right. And I think by doing that, it showed you he's capable of doing it structurally within his mouth.
Yes,
right?
He was.
Because if he couldn't, maybe you'd be more concerned about that kind of thing. Because that could sometimes be the struggle with speech is it's a structural, muscular thing.
But he could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of shows you, right? But like frustrating that you're like, oh, you have it here. Just get
Right? He said lollipop every time.
I know.
So cute, but also no, we have to correct that.
It's very cute. But I think the over exaggeration of what you're doing in your mouth is important because I think they don't know how these sounds are coming out of their body sometimes. So I think if they see you going, they're like, oh, wait, I could put my tongue like she is. Like, but until then, they might not know that that's what they have to do to make that sound.
Yeah, you can show them, look, my tongue is touching, but like you can show them and try get them to imitate that motion. When, I think another point for this generation is that they spend so much time looking at characters on screens and they spend less time than prior generations actually just watching the movement of your mouth and your tongue during conversation.
Yeah, that's true.
No, there's no character on a screen that's going to replace watching you live in front of them, moving your mouth and your tongue to speak.
Right.
So, and we do want to get them to focus in on that. So we should say things to them like, watch my mouth and point to your mouth. Watch my mouth as you're pronouncing a sound that they're struggling with.
Right.
And see if you can get them to do it. It's also a really good idea, and maybe lollipop is sort of like this, but
Yeah.
using tongue twisters,
Oh yeah.
you know, where there's alliteration, which is when words start with the same sound.
Yeah.
Or words like lollipop, where it's harder to say,
Mhm.
but it repeats the sound. That whole tongue twisters like Sally sells seashells by the seashore forces the children to do that S sound or to practice it.
Yes. It's at least practice.
Yeah.
Like, right. But like, do it slow. I wouldn't like, because tongue twisters are supposed to be like boom fast, but I would be like, Sally sells like maybe doing it over and over and over again. By the last part of that sentence, maybe they'll be able to do it, but maybe not. Maybe it just will take a lot of practice, because I think if you try to do it really fast, they're not going to be able to see what's going on here.
Yeah, no, they have to be able to see what's happening in your
Yeah.
mouth. It's that modeling that matters so much, I
Right.
think, ultimately.
Right.
If there's a structural issue where they have trouble moving their tongue or their mouth in that way, I've seen speech therapy do amazing things. You know, the children have told me, like, the speech therapist holds a lollipop in a certain place in their mouth to force the movement of the tongue.
Yes, and I've seen like these little brushes that one of the speech therapists would give home, like to do for homework, and they would like they were told to brush like certain parts of their mouth, I guess maybe to
create sensation.
Yes, I think so that you could start to feel more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, again, we're not, and disclaimer number 2, we're not saying don't have speech therapy or speech therapists. Very, very important.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does not rise to that level.
Right.
So we said, have them watch your mouth very carefully when you're making these sounds. Use tongue twisters that kind of force the sound multiple times.
Right.
But also we have to build practice into our interactions. So if I know, for example, Michael had trouble with the sound of L, I'm going to find reasons and ways that words that have the L sound, especially in the beginning of the word, I think in the beginning, but then that have the L sound in them have to be used. I'm going to create situations in which the child has to practice that sound.
Answer with an L word.
Right.
Yeah, because they won't know that you're setting that up.
Right.
But you know. Right.
You know, I can imagine, I don't think we did this, but even saying to Michael something like, what's that thing called in the back of your clothing? What's that thing that tells the size? So that he could look at us and say, like, Wable.
Oh, it's a label.
It's a label.
Yeah.
Lots of reasons to use it.
Yeah.
Tongue twisters are like, I think they're like fun for a minute, but then it loses, you know, children have a short attention span.
Yeah.
So lots of ways to weave it into conversation. Even to say to a child when they come home from their early childhood program, to say to them, what did you learn today? If a child who's struggling with L just says to you, you know, something like, what did you learn today? Trees. You can say to the child, you should say to me, I learned about trees, right?
Yeah.
Can you say, I learned about trees? I would say, can you say, I learned about trees?
Yeah. Because I think
so that L is in there.
Model, because I think often they're answering one word questions because it's difficult for them to say the L sound, say. So they'll be like, oh, I'll just skip over it and just tell her trees and it'll answer her question.
Yeah.
But really, we should be modeling what conversation should be like, right? So I think saying, no, let's say it in a full sentence. I learned about trees, or I like that, or whatever it is, helps just communication skills too.
Yes. I remember my son it was like a doll that he played with, and he named it, you're going to laugh, but he must've been hungry that day because he named it Pancake Flapjack.
Nice.
Right?
Love it.
Pancake. So that forever to be known as Pancake.
Yeah.
Pancake Flapjack. And I love that Flapjack was in it. We used to say the whole name because the L was in Flapjack.
Yeah.
So if he said Flapjack, we would be like,
oh, that's not
Flapjack.
Yeah.
Flapjack. Watch my mouth.
Yeah.
Flapjack.
Yeah. So it's funny that he chose that because
he did. He must have been hungry. He's naming it after pancakes and flapjacks.
I love it.
Children.
Yes.
We build it into our interactions. And then I think that when he was young, I probably did that instinctively,
Yeah.
right? But here's something that I never thought to do. Plus, let's face it, Michael is currently pronouncing all of his L's at 31 years old. So this was like 30 years ago. This was all taking place at a time at which we didn't have devices so easily available to us, right? 30 years ago.
That's true. Yeah.
So, but the other piece of advice is to record children as they are talking so that they can hear themselves, because sometimes they don't hear their own mispronunciation. They'll hear it if you do it. Like if we would have looked at Michael and said, Wowie Pop, he would have laughed.
Yeah.
But he's doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't hear our own pronunciations. Think about what it's like when you hear your voice in a recording and you think that doesn't sound like me. Well, yes, it does. You just don't sound that way to yourself because you're in your own head.
Right.
Right.
It sounds different. Yeah. So, I think I never would have thought to do the recording ever, but I never jumped to technology, but but I think that it is telling, because like there's a girl that I know in my school, she's not in my class, but she replaces Z's with J's.
Oh.
So there's a boy in my class that's named Zachary. She calls him Zachy, but she's saying Jackie. Now, my aide's name is actually Jackie. So I was like, what do you mean? Like, she's not here today.
Is English her language of origin?
I'm not sure, because she's not in my class.
Maybe
but
not.
She comes down with him because they're on the same bus sometimes, and she'll like help him out. And when I would say Zachary, she'd be like, yeah, like that's what she's saying. So I think maybe if you recorded her, then she would maybe hear it.
Maybe, but you have to present it to them in a way that's non-threatening and non-critical.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out in the context of what's happening, how to do that.
Yeah.
This is also true, by the way, this advice that we're giving. And it reminded me when I asked you, is that her language of origin?
Yeah.
This is also really helpful to children who have learned a different language. They're acquiring English because English has some sounds that other languages don't have, and vice versa. Right.
Yeah.
So if the language of their language of origin, the language they first learned, does not have certain sounds, you are going to have to purposefully focus them on how you're forming your mouth in certain ways to create sounds, because they've just never had to do it before.
Right.
That's true of children who are acquiring English and adults who are acquiring English. You have to purposefully teach them how to place their mouths.
Yeah.
Again, because they never had to do it before.
They never had to do it before. And sometimes you can't overcome it because your brain has been like, well, we don't need that sound. So we're done. We don't need it. Right. So like,
you can retrain, don't you think?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, people work with people who are acquiring English to try and build those sounds into their repertoire of sounds.
Yeah.
I think when people are speaking quickly, they tend to go back to their origin.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I'm upset, I tend to go back to more of a New York accent.
Same.
Right. From my childhood.
The Jersey comes out.
Yeah. Right.
I'm a little upset or not thinking, or like, yeah, that's true.
Instead of saying like I do now I'm not gonna be able to do it, but instead of saying something like my father, if I'm upset, I might say my father, like they do in other areas, right? Because it's my origin.
Yeah.
So helpful not only for children who have pronunciation miscues, but also for people who may be learning English to keep in mind that their language might not have that sound. I would definitely have asked that family, is this a sound that's familiar to her?
With her. Yeah.
Or, so that I know how to approach it.
Right.
Though it's probably in very similar ways.
I would,
recording them again, I would have to figure out how to do it in a way that's fun and not at all critical and offensive.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm recording, if we say to the child, let's practice those L's and I'm going to record us doing it.
Yeah.
So we see how it sounds after.
Yeah.
They might actually enjoy that.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Children of this generation generally love to be recorded because they're used to it.
Yes.
Not every child.
Not every child.
But a lot of children are very used to being on the other end of the family's technology, having their photo taken or being recorded.
Yeah.
So they don't object so much.
Or I've done it, like maybe you do it with like the whole group, not just pinpointing the one student, because I've like recorded students being like, everybody say hello, right? And then I'm going to play it and be like, you're going to try to guess who this is based on the voice, right? And they think it's hilarious. obviously funny, you know, and
that's a fun game.
You know, and so you would be recording the one who needs it for speech, but he wouldn't realize that it's for him because you're just playing this game with everybody.
That's a super fun game.
Yeah.
Pick out the voice.
Yeah. It's
I like
so
it.
much fun.
I like it.
Yeah.
As long as nobody's going to make fun of the child who's got the mispronunciation. If I don't want them saying things like, oh, that's Joey because he says W's instead of L's. I don't want that. That's just embarrassing. Yeah. So non-threatening ways to record, I think, are very interesting because it would be interesting to me to see if the child realizes from listening to themselves.
Yeah, true.
You know, if they do something or say something. I don't know. It would be interesting.
Yeah.
But, you know, all's well that ends well, Michael pronounces L's. And the children who struggle with these sounds, if we do things like we've said, like exaggerating your mouth and tongue position, using tongue twisters for fun, right? That's a fun activity with children. Making sure to build lots of practice into all of your interactions with the child, practice in that sound in ways that are kind of authentic and natural for them to use. And recording them talking to see if they figure out that they're not pronouncing it the way that we're encouraging them to.
Right. That would be so interesting,
right?
For them to make that like aha moment of like, oh wait, I'm not pronouncing that right. You know, like,
that would be a major aha moment.
Yeah.
Cool. So we hope that this helps folks. Never hesitate to recommend speech therapy though.
100%. Yeah.
And see what they say.
Absolutely.
But at least this gives you some tools in your box if they don't qualify for that help.
Yeah.
It's also really helpful if children are seeing speech therapists to ask the family to find out for you if you can talk to the therapist to find out what strategies might help.
Yeah.
Because they'll know more and better strategies than this even. And if for some reason you can't connect with the speech therapist, to ask the family to bring back the strategies to you to use in the classroom. We want to always be cooperating with clinicians like speech therapists.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, ponder all that. And we will catch you next Monday on the podcast. Thanks for being our preschool peeps. And be sure to check out our website at howpreschoolteachersdoit.com.